Hi, everyone. It's Margaret Manning here with lifeafterdeath.com. Lifeafterdeath.com is a community of people who are interested in life after death and in those questions around the afterlife, what happens to us when we die, and reincarnation, spirituality. We speak with experts in areas that can reinforce this message and have a great conversation about different aspects of afterlife. And my guest today is Annie Mattingley. Annie is a writer and a speaker. And she's always been intrigued by the mystery of death. She's an after-death communications researcher. Now, she is a hospice volunteer, inspired really after her parents both died. But it wasn't until her daughter died from suicide in 2010 that her life was transformed by her daughter's communication with her. So it's a fascinating story, and I'm really happy to have you here with us, Annie. Thank you for coming.
Oh, you're most welcome, Margaret.
Now, I've only told briefly what the story of your life here is, but it's really pretty clear that you've had a transformational moment when you talked to your daughter who had died, but then found it wasn't such an uncommon practice, that a lot of people were experiencing this. You wrote a book, The After Death Chronicles, and I'd love you to share with us just what you discovered and in talking to people, and more about your daughter's conversation.
Well, it was quite remarkable. First of all, as a mother whose daughter had died, it was an amazing experience to have connection with her. And at first I thought this was this very unique experience that not many people had, and I wasn't talking about it. But kind of cautiously, I told someone. I said, I've had this unusual experience that's been happening in the recent weeks. And she told me a story. And I thought, well, that's interesting. She's also had an experience.
Wow.
And it went like that. I kept quietly telling friends and family, and everybody had a story to tell. And I said, why aren't we talking about this? And that's how it began. And then I began to formally collect the stories, and to discover that there were so many ways in which connection is made.
Well, what you just said, actually, so what you just said in itself is amazing, because what you're saying here is that our conversation about life after death it's not that it's taboo, it's that we actually think it's so crazy and unexpected that we don't want to talk about it. But I think that's one of the great things about your book. So please tell us how you found these people, and tell us a few of the stories about how people connected with their loved ones.
Well, it wasn't easy. It wasn't hard to find them. All I had to do was sort of show up, and they came to me. This first story I'll tell you I think it's the first story I tell in the book, and it came from my Spanish teacher. I used to winter in Mexico, and I came for the winter, and I told her what had happened the year before and told her what I was doing. And she said, oh, I have a story, and we spent that Spanish class talking about her story. She had the experience after her mother's death of having repeated contact through a white butterfly. And the butterfly would come in unusual ways at unusual times. And to her, it was totally clear that this was her mother visiting. But when she told her niece, who was, maybe in the area of 20, about this, she scoffed. Oh, come on, Tia. No, this is ridiculous.
Yeah.
So, then they were walking in a park in Oaxaca, Mexico, and they saw a white butterfly off to the side of the path. And my teacher said, well, there it is. There's your grandma. And the niece said, no. And then it is. She says, it is. And then she said, well, if it is my grandma, she says, I want you to come right here. And she pointed to her chest like this. And the butterfly took off like an arrow and came right to her chest.
Wow.
And
that's incredible.
Totally shocked. And it transformed her. She knew that was not possible, that butterfly could have come from yards and yards away directly to her chest as she was directed.
To her heart, yeah.
To her heart. I say chest, but you're right. It is.
Yes, that's amazing. So that's actually very common in reading I've done too. That a dead person or a deceased person will take the form of a creature in nature.
Yeah.
I actually, I mean, like we say, I have a story. I mean, this is my simple story, is that every time I see a moth, a little moth, I think of my mom. And I know now after talking that it could just as well be her trying to communicate with me as it is me saying that association is with my mother.
Right.
So it's like both ways. But so I get the butterfly for sure. That's a great story. How else do people?
And have you thought about the fact that moth is the first 4 letters of mother?
No, I hadn't thought of that. Oh, I've got goosebumps. Oh my gosh. Is that because someone else has told you about moths?
No, I never heard
you
that
just
before.
thought of that?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. That's really, creepy. But see, that's the reaction, isn't it? It's like, that's very, very strange. I'm covered in goosebumps. And if I turn around and see a moth on my blind, I'm going to be really happy.
Right.
Yeah. So that's great. So nature is one vehicle. Tell us about another one.
Yeah. Well, here's a situation in which a woman's power has gone out. It's winter, it's cold, the whole house is closed up. There's no movement in the house, no fans or nothing like that. She's totally alone. She lights 2 candles. And as she's sitting there with no distractions, which is kind of like creating the altar we were talking about, she simply says, well, if my father were to visit me, how would he come? And both candles go completely out, just like that. Not just one, but 2.
Wow.
And she knows in that moment that he has answered her question, that he's saying, I'm right here, right now.
Wow, that's amazing.
Like a breath, blowing candles out.
That's incredible. I've also heard that scent, you can hear, you can feel, you can smell an odd scent. Is that something anyone ever told you?
Yes. It isn't as common as the many other ways.
Yes.
And maybe it's because not everyone has their own way of receiving. But I've heard of a college student who smells pipe smoke, her grandfather's pipe smoke, in her dorm room, door closed, no one else there, and she just goes, oh, he's coming to see, he's just checking up, he's just making connection.
That's such that's such an intimate thing, that's such a personal habit that he's sharing.
Right.
Wow, that's very
pipe smoke, perfume, essential oils, that whatever smell is associated with a particular person.
Yeah. Sometimes
odd smells. A woman is sitting at her computer and she smells what is it called? I think it's called D&S ointment. It's an ointment anyway.
Yes,
she smells ointment and liverwurst. Now those are very unusual. And she turns around, looks at this photograph of her father and says, is that you? And
yes,
it is. Now, why those smells? That's very odd smells. But the ointment was what they used on his bottom while he was in diapers right before he died. You can't get much more intimate than that. And liverwurst was something that he loved. So,
well, in a way, it's their message that makes it very specific, like it wasn't a smell that couldn't be identified quickly. I mean, so there's other things I want to make sure. In your book, I know you've got 10 different chapters, and each one you talk about a different way that people have communicated with their families. You talk about dreams as well. Tell me about a dream. How does that work?
Dreams are really the most common way. I think more people are willing to accept a dream than they are to accept, say, a vision. Something lighting up the wall in the middle of the night. And the dreams can sometimes have messages in them for other people. I think I'll share a dream that I had because it was very significant. My parents died in 1984, and they died 2 weeks apart. So it was very traumatic. And I and my sister were, besides being in grief, we were like, why did you have to do about our father? Our mother had cancer and it was a long death, but about our father, it was like, hey, couldn't you have hung around just for us? Did you have to follow her? And there was a little resentment in it. And my father, I have to tell a little background to the dream. My father had polio as a 2-year-old and had always walked with canes. My mother was a really good ballroom dancer. But of course, they couldn't dance together because of his disability.
Yes.
And in this dream, I'm standing at this edge of a huge ballroom with a Strauss waltz being played by an orchestra on the other side of the room. It's a very beautiful space, and there's no one in this room but me and a couple who are dancing on the other side of the room, and they're swirling big, the skirt is swirling wide, and they're going all around, and they come close to me, and I see that it is my mother and my father, and I call out, I say, Mother, Daddy. I call out, nothing. I go out on the dance floor. They just dance around me. They don't pay any attention to me at all. And I wake up out of this, and I feel the rightness of the fact that
they found each
are
other
together, that they are doing this beautiful thing that they were never able to do. And saw my resentment and almost anger, I was close to anger, just dissipated.
No, that's wonderful.
That's how you could recognize that this is an actual connection, because otherwise I might have wakened and gone, see, they're not even paying any attention to me now either, you know, but I didn't.
That's really cool. That's a lovely story. And that that's, like you say, more common, that you can create a dream to complete an unfinished thing in your own mind. But I wanted you, but these are great stories. We could go on forever, but it's better just to buy the book. It's called The After Death Chronicles, and in it you go through these magical stories. But I remember listening to an interview that you were doing, and you mentioned something about a friend of yours who was ill, and when she passed, you made a deal with her that I presume she'd have some communication with you.
Right.
Tell us about that, because it sounded really intriguing.
It was a lovely experience, and I did not know that it was possible to make a plan in advance, but it is. She was fascinated by my book, and she was very close to death, and I had taken some food for her, and she invited me to join her for lunch. And we were eating. She was eating very little. I was eating more heartily. Yeah. And she asked me about the book, which I found surprising because she was so near death.
Yes.
And she said, well, would you like me to visit you? And I said, well, I would love you to visit me after you died. Although it was kind of freaky because it was emotional to have her say that. And so she she started telling me a story, and I thought, well, maybe her mind was a little off and she was just distracted because she was telling me about this time that a bird had gone down into her wood stove and almost died, and she had rescued it and wiped it off and taken it outside, and it had flown up into the air. And when she put her hands up like this, and she looked almost ecstatic when she told me this, because it was so important to her that she had saved this bird's life. Yes. And she told me what kind of bird it was. It was some kind of swallow, I thought. Maybe it had violet in it or something, but I left and I walked back to my house, and I was just thinking more about her dying, and not thinking about this arrangement we had made at all. And a few days later, she died. And the first time that I went out, I actually went outside. When I'm really sad, I need to move physically. Yeah. So I went into my garden I was doing some clipping of some kind, and a bird started to circle me up in the air, and it went around and around and around, and I thought, could this be Anne? What did we talk about? Didn't we talk about a bird?
Sparrows or something, yeah.
Yeah. And then the bird went and landed on the side of my bluebird nest box in this particular pose. I'll never forget it. It was facing to the left, very clear profile. And it stayed there while I walked closer and closer and closer. And then I'm standing there staring at it and thinking and trying to remember what arrangement we had made and feeling a little crazy, actually. And then all of a sudden I realized I was standing on a little ant's nest, and there were ants crawling up my socks, you know. I said, okay, I'll go in and I'll look it up in the book. So I go scrape off the ants and go dashing in the house, and I open up my bird book. And under swallow, the first thing it says is violet something, or violet. There were two words. It's violet something. Yeah. Anyway, and I open up to the page with the picture. the pose is identical. The angle is identical. The position is identical.
Wow.
Oh my goodness, this is the bird. This is the bird she was talking about. And then I start reading it and it says, likes to perch on nest boxes. I said, wait a minute, did they write this just for me? And then I couldn't see any violet on this bird, which was part of what confused me.
Yes,
but I couldn't see it in the picture either. And it said that the violet was hidden when they were perched. So that made sense. And there was also something about how the wings, I thought that swallows all had long tails, and I couldn't see a long tail, but the wings covered the tail when they were perched. So there were 3 facts in the book. Besides,
that's really sweet. That's great. So did you talk to her at all? I mean, is your daughter the only person that you've actually talked to?
She's not the only person, but Anne and I did not, her friend name was Anne, did not talk. I opened up the door and flung up my arms and said, thank you. So joyful.
That's great. What a nice story. Oh my goodness. Okay. Well, I'm actually really intrigued now to read the rest of these stories, but thank you so much for sharing these ones. Is there any other that you wanted to make sure you told us, or are you happy that we've covered a good range of ways people can talk to us?
That's enough for right now.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. We've got other conversations that we're going to have, and I really do appreciate this one. This has been very moving, and thank you for sharing it.
You're welcome.
If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to our Life After Death YouTube channel and visit our website at lifeafterdeath.com. We are a community of people who are fascinated by the topic of life after death and subjects like near-death experience, the afterlife, reincarnation, and spirituality. Together, we are exploring and discovering these topics together with curiosity and an open heart.